Imagine a world of glittering palaces, where the last Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II, lived a life of unimaginable luxury with his family. From the opulent Winter Palace in St. Petersburg to the sprawling Alexandra Palace at Tsarskoye Selo, the Romanovs were insulated from the harsh realities faced by their subjects. This was a family that seemed to have it all: a loving marriage, beautiful children, and the divine right to rule over a vast empire. Nicholas himself was a devoted family man, often photographed in simple, relaxed settings with his wife, Alexandra, and their 5 children: Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and the long-awaited heir, Alexei. Their private life was a world away from the brewing storm outside their palace walls. But this gilded cage was fragile, and the foundations of their world were about to crumble. While the imperial family lived in splendor, the Russian people were suffering. The early 20th century was a time of immense social and economic strain. Millions of peasants were trapped in poverty, struggling to farm small plots of land with outdated methods. In the rapidly growing cities, factory workers toiled for long hours in dangerous conditions for pitiful wages. There was a deep and growing chasm between the elite and the masses. Discontent was simmering, and revolutionary ideas were spreading like wildfire. Groups advocating for change, from moderate liberals to radical Bolsheviks, gained support. The people were desperate for a voice, for dignity, and for bread. The Russo-Japanese War of 1905 ended in a humiliating defeat for Russia, further eroding public trust in the Tsar's leadership and exposing the weakness of his regime. The subsequent Bloody Sunday massacre, where peaceful protesters were fired upon by imperial guards, shattered the centuries-old image of the Tsar as the benevolent little father of his people. A revolution had been ignited, but for now, it was suppressed. Nicholas was forced to make concessions, including the creation of a parliament, the Duma, but he fundamentally resisted any real sharing of his autocratic power. He believed he was chosen by God, and that his will was Russia's destiny. This disconnect between the ruler and the ruled was a ticking time bomb, and the clock was running out. Then came the final, fatal blow: World War I. In 1914, Russia was plunged into the Great War. An initial wave of patriotic fervor soon gave way to despair. The Russian army, though massive, was poorly equipped and badly led. Soldiers were sent to the front without proper weapons, ammunition, or even boots. The casualties were staggering, reaching into the millions. The war effort drained the nation's resources, causing severe food and fuel shortages back home. People stood in line for hours for a loaf of bread, their anger and desperation growing with each passing day. In a disastrous move, Nicholas II decided to take personal command of the army in 1915, leaving the capital in the hands of his wife, Tsarina Alexandra. This was a catastrophic decision. Not only was Nicholas an incompetent military strategist, but his absence from Petrograd, as St. Petersburg was now called, created a power vacuum. With the Tsar at the front, Tsarina Alexandra's influence grew, and with it, the influence of one of the most mysterious figures in Russian history, Grigory Rasputin. A Siberian peasant and self-proclaimed mystic, Rasputin had gained the Tsarina's unwavering trust. Because he seemed to be the only one who could ease the suffering of her hemophiliac son, Alexei. The Tsarina, a German princess already distrusted by the Russian public, became convinced that Rasputin was a holy man sent by God. His sway over her was absolute. He advised on ministerial appointments, military strategy, and state policy. Corrupt and incompetent officials were promoted based on Rasputin's recommendations, while capable ministers were dismissed. Rumors of his debauchery and his control over the imperial family spread throughout the empire, scandalizing the aristocracy and enraging the public. The government descended into chaos. The presence of Rasputin at the heart of power symbolized the decay and corruption of the entire regime. He was finally assassinated by a group of nobles in December 1916, but it was too little, too late. The damage was done. The monarchy had lost all credibility. By the winter of 1917, the Russian Empire was on the brink of collapse. The war was going disastrously, the economy was in ruins, and the people were starving. In the capital, Petrograd, the situation was explosive. On International Women's Day, February 23rd by the old Russian calendar, thousands of women textile workers went on strike, pouring into the streets to demand bread. They were soon joined by other workers, and the strike quickly grew into a massive, citywide protest. The Tsar, still at military headquarters, underestimated the severity of the situation. He ordered the protests to be put down by force. But this time, the soldiers, who were mostly peasants and workers themselves, refused to fire on the crowds. Instead, they began to mutiny and join the revolution. The police were overwhelmed, government buildings were seized, and symbols of the monarchy were torn down. Within a few days, the Tsar had lost control of his own capital. His authority had evaporated. The February Revolution was not led by any single party. It was a spontaneous, leaderless uprising born of sheer desperation. Advised by his generals that he no longer had the support of the army or the country, Nicholas II had no choice. On March 2, 1917, aboard his imperial train, the man who believed he was God's chosen ruler signed the abdication manifesto, giving up the throne for himself and his son. The 300-year-old Romanov dynasty came to a sudden and unceremonious end. A provisional government, composed of liberals from the Duma, took power, promising democratic reforms. But this new government was weak and made the crucial mistake of continuing the war. This decision alienated the very people who had brought them to power, the soldiers and workers who were desperate for peace. Across the country, local councils of workers and soldiers, known as Soviets, emerged as a parallel source of power, challenging the authority of the provisional government. The most powerful of these was the Petrograd Soviet, which increasingly fell under the influence of radical socialists. Russia was in a state of dual power, with no single entity truly in control. This instability created the perfect opportunity for the most radical revolutionary of all. In April 1917, a sealed train crossed the German border into Russia. Aboard was Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Party, who had been living in exile for years. The Germans, hoping to further destabilize Russia and knock it out of the war, had facilitated his return. As soon as he arrived in Petrograd, Lenin electrified the revolutionary scene. He condemned the provisional government and called for all power to the Soviets. His simple, powerful slogans of peace, land, and bread resonated deeply with the exhausted and desperate masses. While other socialist groups were willing to cooperate with the provisional government, Lenin and the Bolsheviks offered a clear radical alternative, an immediate end to the war. The redistribution of land to the peasants and the transfer of all power to the workers' councils. Throughout the summer and fall of 1917, the Bolsheviks' popularity soared as the failures of the provisional government mounted. They were organized, disciplined, and utterly ruthless in their pursuit of power. The final act came in October 1917. Under the brilliant organization of Leon Trotsky, the Bolsheviks' Red Guards moved to seize control of Petrograd. It was less a popular uprising like in February and more a well-planned military coup. Key points in the city, bridges, telegraph offices, railway stations, were taken over with little resistance. The climax came with the storming of the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government. While later Soviet propaganda would portray this as a heroic battle, in reality, it was a relatively small-scale affair. The government ministers inside were arrested, and by the morning of October 26, Lenin was able to proclaim that the Bolsheviks had seized power. The October Revolution was complete. It plunged Russia into a brutal civil war and set the stage for the creation of the world's first communist state, the Soviet Union. The promises of peace, land, and bread would give way to decades of totalitarian rule, terror, and hardship. And what became of the Tsar and his family? After his abdication, Nicholas, Alexandra, and their 5 children were held under house arrest. As the Bolsheviks consolidated power, the family was moved further and further east, deep into Siberia, to the city of Yekaterinburg. Their fate was sealed by the advancing anti-Bolshevik White armies during the Civil War. Fearing the Romanovs could be rescued and become a rallying symbol for their enemies, the local Bolsheviks received orders from the top leadership. In the dead of night, on July 17, 1918, in the cellar of a house, Nicholas, Alexandra, their children Olga, Tatiana Maria, Anastasia, and Alexei, along with their loyal servants, were brutally executed. Their deaths marked a gruesome and definitive end to the Romanov dynasty and the old world they represented. The story of Nicholas II is a profound tragedy, a tale of a well-intentioned but flawed ruler, unable to grasp the seismic changes sweeping his nation, who led his family and his empire to a catastrophic end. It's a powerful reminder of how quickly the course of history can turn, and how the lives of millions can be altered forever by the forces of war, revolution, and ideology. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this journey into history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let us know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to see next. Until then, stay curious.